All right, and we are live. Welcome, everybody, to episode 44 of Narrations and Lamentations with Matiram and the Boys. I am your host, Matiram. With me tonight, we have one of the two boys, Michael. Go ahead and say hi.
What's up?
And the first winner of our Honorary Boy contest, we have Nicholas Bollaert joining us tonight. Nicholas, if you want to take a minute to introduce yourself to maybe some of the viewers who don't know who you are.
Sure. My name is Nick Bollaert, and I play Warhammer 8th Edition, mostly Dark Elves. I do have a channel where I have put up some battle reports, a mix of friendly games and tournament games. But I definitely got involved in the community with an interest in the tournament style of play. And I'm here to represent Skip. I've got T-shirt, Seed of Rebirth.
Very nice. And to discuss, this is kind of a very interesting idea for a topic tonight that you put forth, Nick, and what we're going to be talking about is our experiences with failure in Warhammer. And this is, I mean, it's a very broad topic and it can cover a lot of different things. So it should be a very fun topic to get into and kind of dig into from a couple of different angles. But before we really get digging into that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit of hobby time. I know everybody out there has had their hobby time shaken up with the new Age of Sigmar coming out. As those of you who have followed the channel know, our channel and our group will not be making the transition. We are going to live and die with 8th edition. So I'm hoping at least we're getting our hobbying mojo going. So Michael, let's get started with you first. What are you working on the old hobby table this week?
Elf Spearman.
How many of them you got to do?
For the current list, I need another 10 of them done.
That's not bad. I would have expected, with your laziness, you to go 45, 50.
Well, I mean, I'm only running a 20-man break, so 10
okay.
down, 10 to go.
Right. All right. And Nick, you got anything you've been working on lately?
Yeah, I actually am trying to finish up a few Dark Elves, some Brolocks and Dark Riders. I do have one more 8th Edition tournament this summer. I'm going to be going to Bayou Battles in Houston. So I'm trying to just finish up what I want to bring to that. I'm going to try to bring a little more competitive army this year, we'll see.
Cool. So have they confirmed that they're sticking with 8th
yes.
for the tournament?
Yes.
Cool. I'm kind of interested to see what groups do that and what groups decide to go ahead and just throw down on 9th and just to see what happens.
Well, they had made the decision before the Age of Sigmar, was announced to be such a departure. Basically, when it was 3 months out, they pretty much said, well, we haven't heard anything yet, 3 months out, so we're going to call it and make it an 8th Edition game. I do know there's another tournament near me, the Nova Open, and they basically sent out a survey to, I guess, all the prospective players, asking like if they wanted an 8th Edition tournament, an Age of Sigmar tournament, some kind of hybrid, just run like demo games of Age of Sigmar in the Fantasy Hall. So they're still up in the air about it, and that's going to be like around Labor Day weekend.
Mm. I'll be interested to see what they choose, considering how many people have been just blowing up crazy that it's not not a competitive game and that you've got to comp it 1,000 different ways. It'll be interesting to see this early on if there's anybody that can kind of wrangle that horse.
Well, I think that's going to be the key. I think the key is going to be the personalities. If the people who run fantasy events get discouraged and people who are gung-ho for Age of Sigmar are gung-ho, then the people who are willing to put in the work are going to get stuff done. In that Nova Open event is a pretty big war game con. It's mostly like 40K, but they have all kinds of, they do Infinity and Malifaux and all kinds of games. And fantasy has always been like one of the weaker games there, just because this area isn't necessarily a big fantasy area. So I wouldn't be surprised if, the fantasy old guard sort of lost interest, and if there are people that are Age of Sigmar gung ho, they that may be enough to sweep it.
Okay. Well, all right, so I'll go next in terms of my table. I am so close to being done with my Lizardmen army, I can taste it. Last night I finished my 5 Cold One Riders, so that's done. So the last thing I have to do for the army is 20 Temple Guard, old school Temple Guard, like the big honkin' metal ones that Vince Venturella gave me. And I'm getting those painted up to kind of look spiritually like they're not really lizard men, that the Slann just kind of summon the spirits of the dead lizard men to guard him. So I'm trying some interesting stuff with just painting with inks instead. So we'll see how well that works. And I got to get this the heck out of the way because to all indications, Lord Tremendous has sent me just shy of my body weight in new models.
Wow.
Because he literally, if you look on his eBay thing, like you see all of the different stuff he's played in his battle reports. He's selling, I would say conservatively, 20% of the models I've ever seen him use in his battle reports. He says everything else is unpainted, so it's coming to me. So I'm afraid I'm gonna have to buy a truss for my mailman for for this box that's gonna get here, no doubt. But I've already got my bone-colored spray primer ready to go. So done on the board. Maybe a little more detail than that, but couldn't be any worse than Lord T doing it as bare plastic. So, but yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm working with. I'm trying to get the Lizardmen done before the next project lands on my plate. So, all right. So let's go ahead and get into the main topic for the night, and that is failure in Warhammer. Now, since this is your topic, Nicholas, I want to give you a minute to kind of discuss what this means to you, what your ideas for this topic was, and kind of where you would like to get the conversation started. So be my guest.
Okay. Well, to be honest, it did occur to me, given that I am the stand-in for Skip, and not intended as a slam in any way, but since the idea of Skip losing a bunch of games has been like a topic of continual conversation, and when he's gone back and forth about whether he's going to keep this army or that army, both in this campaign and the last campaign, that's what first brought it to my thinking. And I play Dark Elves, and I've been playing them for a while now, and I also have struggled with them. I mean, I've got certainly more losses than wins in the battle reports that I've put up. And I was just trying to think, exactly, why is that? Like, I don't consider myself a terrible Warhammer player. I'm certainly, I probably don't have the experience of a lot of people because I don't get to play the volume of games that I would like to. But so I'm hesitant to just say, well, I'm just bad at Warhammer. So I tried to think, what is it? What is contributing to that? And I think, let's sort of maybe think about the games that we've played. Everything from list composition to tactical errors to just my perceptions about the way things are. Like I watched a lot of the YouTuber videos before I really got into it, and that's one of the things that did sort of bring me into the community. I was watching a lot of people's videos and I thought, I'd like to participate. So I got my army, painted up a little bit of it, had some other stuff painted by other people, and I just wanted to be able to play, in order to fully participate, not just be like a spectator. And I had my own ideas about how I wanted the Dark Elf army to be and to play, and I think that then actually once I started to play it, I realized that a lot of the things that I thought about it in the beginning really didn't work the way I expected them to work. And that was certainly a contributor to to a lot of my early failure.
Mhm. So let me kind of put this out to the group, and we can discuss this a little bit. Do you feel that the kernel of sort of failure in terms of with particular armies is more on the side of just raw skill? I mean, you get a lot, particularly the tournament players, just arguing, just going, well, you know what? If you are a skilled player, you can maximize anything and you can make any army work. Or is it a simple matter of not fitting well, not having a particular army's skill set matched you as a general?
Well,
Go ahead, Dick.
I would say, I mean, at the risk of it being a cop-out answer, I'm going to say it's really a little bit of everything.
Mhm.
One thing that I did notice in some of my older games is that, I have the tendency to want to get into combats, right? It's kind of like, oh, my unit is here, your unit is there, they're within charge distance, let's have them fight. Without really stopping to think about, like, is this really a good matchup? Like, I really like the executioners for the Dark Elves. The high strength is awesome. You've got killing blow. They look awesome. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a great matchup for everything. I mean, they're still just T3 elves with a 5-up armor save.
Mm-hmm.
So I played a game against Lizard Men where I put, a block of 20 of them into a block of 20 or 25 Saurus. And I eventually won, 3 or 4 rounds later, and I had like 5 guys left. So it really didn't really work out like for me. So I did have those sort of technical generalship errors. But then also I think not and knowledge, just knowledge of what all the other units can do, is also obviously a key factor. But just going to your point about good players, I think there's a lot that goes into that. I had seen some YouTube commentary videos a few months back where they were talking about the good master players and how they don't take undue risks, right? It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to take this risk, and I'm either going to win the game or I'm going to lose the game, and that's that's sort of a bad risk to take. And the idea that the good players are the ones that understand sort of the odds and the risks and don't make risky chances that are going to win big if it's going to also clean them out if it fails.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole idea about playing for a draw or minimizing the loss, that's a different mindset than, hey, I got this awesome army on the table, let's smash them together and see what happens.
I'll tell you, that was probably the biggest thing that came out of my final game from Brawler's Bash for this past year when I played the Dwarf Gunline list. And I just decided, you know what, I got no chance. I just need to rush it as fast as I can, try and keep enough alive to hit it and kill it. And other than the people who just auto-downvoted me for talking shit about Dwarf Gunlines, most of the response I got was, well, why did you do that? You should have just backed up to the edge of the table and stayed out of his range. And I'm like, well, yeah, I could have done that, but you know what? I showed up to play 5 games of Warhammer this weekend, not 4 games of Warhammer and 1 game of let me show you what my army looks like sitting at the edge of this board for 6 turns.
Right.
And I failed. But I think if I look back at myself, I probably would have been more annoyed and would have considered it a bigger failure personally had I done that and had I just basically stayed out of the game for the sake of the points. Because for me, it's more, like you said, I want to get my models on the table. I want to play with them. I want to see what they can do. And win or loss, I'm going to have fun doing that. So what were you saying, Michael? I know you were starting off at something.
Well, I mean, for the whole, if it's a are you just raw talent, or if it's army meshing well. I think, for me personally at least, it's army meshing. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a great general, but I'm not that bad either. I think when it comes down to it is if you have an army that it does not fit well with you, you're not going to play it right. I mean, let's look at my beastmen. I can play my dwarves all day. I'll have a blast with them. I know how they work. I know how they're supposed to work. I know what works with them. I put beastmen on the table, and there's a disconnect between what I should do and what I actually do. And I think you have to have a certain mindset with your army.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you feel that mindset and that sort of affinity to the army is something that you can overcome? I mean, is that something that just dooms you? If you don't match, you're never going to match, and you're done, you should just sell them? Or with practice and with focusing on what doesn't go right, those failures during the game, can you sort of broaden your army base?
Oh, yeah, definitely. No. I mean, I would say I've definitely improved with the Beastmen. I've found what works with them in certain spots. I mean, there's still rough patches, but when you lose the game, you go, all right, well, this didn't work. Let me try this other tactic. Let me try something different to make this army work.
Okay. So next question related to this, and we'll go round robin again. I want you guys to think about, in the time you've played Warhammer, what has been your biggest failure? And what do you think you learned from it, if anything? I mean, nobody says we're the wise ones here that learn from our mistakes, but one would hope we do. So Nicholas, we're going to put you on the hot seat. What do you think? Biggest mistake, and what did you learn from it?
I would say my biggest mistake was, stubbornly trying to make the Dark Elf list, work the way that I wanted it to work, as opposed to realizing that I needed to adapt play to that style. Like I mentioned when we were off the air, looking back at some of my earlier battle reports, I think that I don't like the Empire, like, just aesthetically, and like for some reason, like that army doesn't appeal to me. But the irony, I think, is that I tried to play Dark Elves like they were Empire. I put up a big block of Corsairs and a big block of extras and a chariot and a couple of war machines and have like no heroes, like the minimum heroes I can get away with, and just throw as many units on the board as possible and have this like big army that's full of T3 guys with virtually no armor saves. And then I be surprised that it didn't work out that well. I played a tournament game where I played against another Dark Elf, and it was a night and day. Like I had literally twice as many drops as he did for deployments. I had exactly 2 heroes. He had like 6 heroes. And most of them on dark pegs or dark steeds. So I think sort of in the big picture, it was that. If you want to talk about a specific game, I played against Tomb Kings, and it's another irony, since Skip had been talking about Tomb Kings and bringing in Tomb Kings. And the whole debate about what people think Tomb Kings are terrible or whatnot. I played a Tomb King army, and it was a tough fight. I thought I was doing okay for a while. I wound up losing fairly big, like a 17-3 or something like that. But it was just because I wasn't paying attention to what mattered in the game. My opponent had 3 of the big war cats, the war sphinx.
Mm-hmm.
So I was concentrating on taking those down, and I was able to, and pretty successfully. But the key, in Tomb Kings is their heroes, right? Their hierophants, where a Tomb Prince might be or whatnot. And I wasn't even paying attention to that at all. Like, there was this archer bunker that I was harassing with some dark riders. Like, it wasn't until like 3/4 of the way the game was over, and I'm like, oh, your hierophant's in that unit? Like, I probably could have killed him a long time ago.
Wah,
And
wah.
some trouble, you know. And the same thing too is like I got through his war sphinxes, and then I wound up, you know, all my units pretty much just got crushed one by one by the big block of skeletons that I didn't really consider that much of a threat. But, you know, you had a Tomb Prince in there and a Necrotect in there, and, you know, they were essentially all buffed up, and, you know, was able to sort of crush through my units one at a time before I could, you know, reorganize a better defense.
Right. So, Michael, what about you? What's your biggest failure, and what have you learned from it?
Overconfidence in my armies. Like I will straight out build a list, and I could probably put it online and just have everyone pick it apart and go, yeah, that's not gonna work at all. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, greatest list ever. I know I built this rock solid. I show up at the table, I sit down, I'm like, yeah, I've got this. And then turn 3 comes around, and I realize I've made a mistake.
And 30 minutes later, my ogres are scraping dwarves off the bottom of their boots. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I've learned is to stop going, all right, this unit is going to take that unit, and I'm going to win. I've eventually, it took some time, but I got myself out of the mindset of, yeah, I'm just going to auto-win every fight, because I'm dwarves.
So you've been blinded by love.
Yeah.
And so what have you learned from that? Because I haven't noticed a whole lot of change.
Oh, ow, burn.
Oh, come on. You still talk more shit about your dwarves than anybody, any of the armies.
I do. But if you notice, while I'm on the table, I'm always looking at the other units going, all right, so to win this fight, I'm going to need all of this.
Right.
I stop going, yeah, that one unit's got this. They can take 4 ogre units, not a problem.
Right. So for me, I would say probably my biggest failing, and I still think I suffer from this. I have fear high elves. Like, I have that rule, me as a general. And I very much, like, when I play against high elves and something goes good for them, like, it totally is overblown in my mind. So whenever I sit down across the table from the high elves, I seize up. Because I've got just this, and yes, they're a good army and everything, but I've got this mindset that they're just indefeatable. And it makes me make stupid mistakes. And it's something that's happened over and over again. And I think part of it may just be because I do lack that extensive experience with them. But it's one of those things I still struggle with. I don't know that I have learned something specifically about that other than I need to freaking knock it off. But not so much. I mean, it's one of those things that I realize is a weakness in me as a general. I'm going to play a worse game against a high elf opponent, not because their army is better than mine, but because I'm psyching myself out from the time the first model hits the table. Excuse me. So, and I probably have to say, like, in other terms, my more concrete failure was going with the dwarves when I did after you left town, Michael. I did it mainly because we kind of missed you, and it was like, hey, it's like having Michael back because there are dwarves on the table. And I was just a wretched match for that army. I didn't like them. I painted up the whole damn army. I played with it, and I traded that army to Skip, and I have not missed it a second since then. So I learned I'm not a dwarf there. That's what I learned from my failing.
It takes a special kind of person to be a dwarf.
Right. And see, and now I wouldn't get any bonuses playing Age of Sigmar because your beard is so much more magnificent than mine. Right. I could get one from work now, but I don't think my daughter wants me to have one. So, so let's see. What other things were we going to specifically talk about? All right. In terms, let's break down a couple of different facets of the game and kind of discuss where you think your biggest failing, your biggest weakness is as a general. First one, list building and army composition. Number 2, deployment. Number 3, the magic phase. And number 4, picking your combats. What do you think is your biggest source of failure, your biggest weakness as a general, and why do you think that particular part comes so hard to you? Nick, we'll start with you.
I'm gonna say I have a sort of a toss-up between deployment and list building, but I think I'll go with list building just because it's definitely been a consistent problem with me. Because again, it's that I've got that kid in the candy store thing. If it's a 2,500 point game, the list I want to bring is 5,000 points. Not because I want to overpower my opponent, but because it's like I don't want to leave anything at home. I want, it's like, I always I love the Cole One Chariot model, so I always want to throw in the Cole One Chariot. I really like the Executioners. And I would love to have the Corsairs, and I've got the beautiful Bloodrack Shrine model now, and the beautiful Cold One Knights. But you just can't fit them all into an army.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was doing was I was sticking in as much as I could get, throw in a Hydra or two, and then I would get the points from my Lords and Heroes budget and just, really skimp on those. And they're just too important to try to play Dark Elves without a reasonable amount of heroes.
Right. All right, Michael. What of those 4 is your biggest weakness?
Picking my combats.
Okay.
As I often will go look at a unit and go, well, I'm going to be able to take this unit. I'm going to suffer some losses, and I completely just forget that there are any other units on the board. So I'll charge 30 guys into this 20-man unit. I'm like, yeah, I've got this, and I forget that there's 3 other units that are sitting right next to it. They're going to charge me in the flank. And
so you kind of get tunnel vision?
Yeah, I get completely just, oh yeah, no, those don't exist. They're not going to charge me. I'm going to win and go.
Right. Because we all know that dwarves are skilled at their ability to use hit and run tactics.
Well, the number of failed charges I make when it's something like, I need 7 inches. Yeah, here's a 4. Thanks, dice.
Yeah, you are particularly skilled at that. Although I do have to say that was something I was going to get into a little later as sort of the goofy failings that seem to have no other explanation but that God doesn't like us. But I'll go ahead and answer mine. For me, it's magic. I am absolutely terrible at the magic phase, and this is beyond even the hey, I miscast on 2 dice at the start of every game. For me, I guess I just want magic to do way too much. I want to get to the magic phase and have my wizard just like blowing everybody up and modifying everything. I want to get like 5 spells a turn off. And so what I'll do is I'll start with like little spells that really don't matter. I mean, it's cool to get a couple of wounds off here and there. And so I'll throw 2 dice here, 2 dice there. And either my opponent is just letting them go through because it's like, who gives a shit? Or by the time I get to the 1 spell that matters, I've left myself with 2 dice and I need a double 6 to get it off. Or I put too much emphasis on what magic can do. I think, okay, if I get this 1 spell off, I'm straight, and I throw 6 dice at it and blow myself up because I'm risking it, and it turns out it wasn't that crucial. So I think I have a really bad risk to reward understanding in the magic phase, and that's probably my weakest area, which of course is why I'm playing Lizardmen now, and I'm going to go with a magic out Slann and high magic, because why not play to my weaknesses? It'll be great.
Yeah.
So let's actually go, because I was going to talk about that other thing. Every Warhammer player I've ever met has some weird, whether it's a superstition or is actually the truth, thing that they just consider they are totally bad at just because the dice hate them, God hates them, whatever. For instance, Skip, we were talking about this earlier, dangerous terrain. He may not necessarily lose more guys to dangerous terrain than anybody else, but he has conflated that failure into his head so much that he now fears anything that could possibly make him take dangerous terrain tests, and it becomes a big hole in his tactics. Do you guys feel like you have one of those sort of overblown fears, and if so, what are they?
Mine is obviously charging at anything. If I need short numbers, I'm not getting there. 7 or 8 on no. And here's the beauty of it: it'll be 2 units. One needs a 7, one needs an 8. I will roll 7 on the unit that needs an 8, and 6 on the unit that needs a 7, and I won't miss it by much. It'll be 1 inch, and it's like, really dice.
And so how do you think, like, blowing that failure up in your mind, how does that affect your tactics as a general?
It makes me a lot more wary of making charges. And I mean, like, a lot of the times charges that I should make, I don't, because I go, well, I'm going to need 8 on the dice, and that's not going to happen for me. So I'm going to charge, fail, and get stranded out in the middle without the rest of my army.
How about you, Nick?
I would say it's the magic phase as well. I'll make my moves and my charges, thinking ahead to, okay, I've got these spells, and in the magic phase I'll be able to do this and that and this and that. And then invariably I'll roll like 3 dice. I just will always have consistently, small magic phases.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, with the Dark Elves, it's like, okay, I've got a level 4 sorceress. I might have a level 2, but then I've probably got, 1 or 2 Brolock units, which can also cast. So I've got a lot of spellcasting stuff, so I need more dice. But it always seems, and it probably isn't true, but it always seems to me that whenever I need a respectable amount of dice, that's when I roll a 3.
Right. So you've got 9 spells to throw and 3 dice to throw with, right? For me, I think the one that I blow out of proportion is my artillery dice with anything with gunpowder in it. Yeah, I've had several just absolutely god-awful explosions. I mean, I was a dwarf player that was blowing up on turn 1 flame cannons that had the rune of rerolling on it.
Yeah.
And so it's gotten to the point now where more often than not, if I have an option, I'm going to take something other than a gunpowdered war machine, even though they're less effective. I mean, when I was playing with the dwarves, I was taking grudge throwers over cannons because I was convinced that I'd throw that cannon down on the table and it'd blow itself up before it did anything. And I think I scared myself, and I still do it with the Empire some too, is I don't take cannons all that often because I know I'm going to blow them the hell up. So I think it very much makes that's a weakness in my list building, because you can be pretty sure that I'm not going to have much in the way of cannons, and if I do, it might be 1. And I'm certainly not going to invest any points in an engineer, because why waste the points on a cannon that's going to blow up? And so it makes my lists kind of predictable in those terms. And of course, we mentioned with Skip, literally dangerous terrain is that man's downfall. He's and the funny part is, I think the issue is he gets so worried about it that he does not make charges that could win him the game. Like, I know he's done that with Bretonia a couple of times, where he's got beautiful flank charge ready to just rip a lance through a unit and just keep going, and he chooses not to make it because he's got to jump over a fence to get there. And it's like, all my knights are going to die, might as well not bother. It's like, oh. Um, so last point, or last couple of points before we get into the questions at the end. You mentioned in the email, Nick, that the other thing that you can apply this idea of failure and learning to from is in the narrative standpoint. So one thing that has been a problem for us, I mean, I'll say it without reservation, is figuring out how you move that narrative forward for your army when you're on the losing end. So what are general thoughts on that? I mean, if you're the one taking a beating, how do you maintain that narrative cohesion and keep your story moving forward if you're just absolutely bombing it out?
Well, I mean, my suggestion, not having
Hey, Nick, I can't hear you, man.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Mm-mm.
I can hear him.
Uh-oh, we have lost Nick.
I can hear you, Nick.
Okay, Michael
I
can
can't
hear
hear
me.
you either. Maybe it's me. I don't know how it would be me.
I can hear Materim.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Did I turn my...
We can hear each other.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
That was weird. Like, my volume just bottomed the hell out for no discernible reason. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Let's start that again.
Okay. So what I was going to say is, obviously I haven't been doing in the narrative campaign like you guys have been, but, one thing that just comes to mind would be sort of the branching storyline. Like if you go into something with if you win, X happens. If you lose, Y happens. And so you've sort of already got sort of a narrative train, so you know where it's going if either event happens. As opposed to sort of stacking everything on. Okay, I need to win in order to get where I want to go. There's always like that sort of backdoor way to do it. Where you take the losing trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that's a good idea and something that we've been somewhat lacking on in the past. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So what do you think? I mean, you've, as a player in the narrative who has had some less than stellar luck, I mean, particularly this time with your beastmen who can't seem to catch a break, how do you foresee you working to develop the beastman's story when they're really the bottom man on the totem pole these days?
Well, that's I mean, with how I treat the other armies, it's different than how I treat the beastmen. The beastmen can lose all day, every game. That does not matter to me with them. The story with them is Brigitte is a little off his rocker, and the losses he suffers are just the chaos gods going, hey, you need to do something different. You need to do something different. Just like poking them and go this way, go that way, go this way. For every other army, I basically when I lose consecutively, I start to focus on a different path for the army. Try and go, well, we were going for this, but maybe the guys finally decide that's a bad idea, and we're going to go for this.
Okay, so you basically are flexible enough with your narrative that you can kind of incorporate the failings and go in a different direction. Is that what I'm reading?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, my answer to this is going to sound a little arrogant, and it's not intended that way. I really haven't had to face this problem yet. I think we're all pretty... Anybody who's been following the channel knows that I win considerably more than I lose. And so it can be somewhat difficult for me to figure out an answer to that when I haven't had to face it. And strangely enough, the few big times I have, I don't think they went well. If you recall, the last big time I was trying to come back from a losing streak was when we lost our original Warriors of Chaos player because he didn't like where I took the narrative after I fixed it. So
Well,
I
to
don't
be
know that I'm
fair, he's
necessarily
there first, so
right, but it's still, I don't know. There's still that. I mean, that may be a failing too. I mean, just that I should face is just as our group the fact that we have had a less than stellar cohesiveness outside of the three of us. But yeah, I don't know that I've stumbled upon that. And I think to a certain degree, it kind of has made me arrogant in that when I'm planning my story points out, and I go, all right, well, you know what? I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to win this one, and then the story is going to go here. So I find myself planning too far ahead. So when, like, for instance, when I was playing your dwarves with the warriors, Michael, and I failed the mission, and I was like, well, damn, I had already kind of known where they were going to go after that point. I probably shouldn't have planned that far ahead. So I had to kind of backtrack and undo that work, and I mean, it ultimately led to a much more fun game with the me trying to do the Demon Prince factory.
yeah, that was a good one.
All right, so
it does. Yeah.
So then let's take this as a what if then, right?
Okay.
So let's go with the what if scenario. Like, so let's take the worst case scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
You continue on your Lizardmen's winning streak, as you have been doing. You know, you eventually expand the army sizes to the point where you bring in Lord Tenok the Slan.
Mm-hmm.
And on the first game, you lose the game, the Temple Guard collapse, Lord Tenok is run down in combat, and you roll a 1, and Lord Tenok just dies. First appearance of the campaign, Lord Tenok is dead and out of the game forever.
It's actually funny that you asked that because I already have a contingency plan for this going in.
Okay, well,
my plan is my next purchase after I finish all this stuff and do the undead stuff for the Lizardmen is I want the Lord Croak model, the one where it's the mummified Slan.
Right, yeah.
And so the idea with that is the next game after Lord Tenok dies, I'm going to do a mission to unlock the Lore of Undeath. And they're basically going to mummify Tenok's ass, and he's going to come back commanding the forces of the undead on behalf of the old ones. That's my plan of where that's going if things were to play out as you painted that picture.
I kind of want that to happen. On this.
It would be a ways away because I know the original Slan model was a pain in the ass for me to paint. The idea of the mummified one, like, it's an amazing model, and I will have it for my collection at some point. But I'm losing some juice. I need to switch gears from the Lizardmen for a little while before I'm ready to do that bad boy. But yeah, and I mean, maybe that's just the way I do. I mean, I think way far ahead. Strangely enough, I almost think, like, the worst idea that I don't have a plan for is, like, what if Tenok shows up and then all of his servants die, like Mapikaju and the new one I'm bringing in, and it's like, all right, so he's here by himself now. What the hell do I do with that?
Yeah.
Or to probably in a more likely, just mathematically speaking scenario, I have no clue what happens if Keldrian the Unhinged dies.
Yeah.
That entire army is built around the fact that he's nuttier than a fruitcake, and if he goes away, that army has no cohesion whatsoever, and I have no idea where it's going in the story. There is potential my failure button that could just bring an army screeching to a halt right there.
Right, yeah, because you'd either like have to totally reorganize the army,
Yeah.
or you know, go with some sort of, you know, shortcut, like the Keldrian's spirit or something is still around, or Or you bring him in as he gets resurrected as a demon or something.
Yeah. See, I don't necessarily want to do that because I'm saving that for my Lord Tenok issue. Like, I want, because I don't want to repeat the same thing too much because that leads to a boring narrative. I want to have that one in my back pocket for later. Of course, I still haven't spent my plot coin, so I do get one get out of death free card, unlike some people.
Hey! I spent it on the Wood Elves.
You did spend it on the Wood Elves.
Mainly because I murdered his wizard in like the last round.
Right. So let's go ahead. We've been going for near on about an hour now, and we do have a couple of a decent number of questions that I think will actually spawn a lot of conversation. So let's check the comments first. First of all, Vince Venturella says, Mitt, if there's one thing we can always agree on, I am not a dwarf either. And he put hashtag I am not a dwarf. I'm not sure like that's a good hashtag. You may end up annoying people there, Vince. And Skip pops in to say his failure is ogres, no surprise, or playing dark elves. I think those are very vague, Skip. I think you need to come in, narrow it down a little bit. It might help more. But that's all we got for comments. First question from Lord Tremendous. When your dice turn on you, do you feel it's karma, chance, or bad luck? And what do you do to turn it around?
Well, for me, it's typically just bad luck. I don't think I've done anything bad enough for karma to come around and get me. And I typically don't turn around. That's typically, I mean, with the dwarves, it's turn 5 by the time I'm getting the charges. I fail the charge. Oh, now it's turn 6 and my army's gone. Woo!
What about you, Nick?
I'd say more chance. I'm not really that superstitious about my dice and whatnot, but as far as recovering from it goes, I usually don't have a backup plan, to deal with the, what if the dice totally fail me, like, all right, if I roll anything but 4 1s, I'm okay. I usually don't have a plan for the 4 1s.
Right. For me, I am a very superstitious person when it comes to dice. If you notice, I have, you may not have seen them in the pictures, but I have a new set of dice for the Lizardmen that are orange, just like my skinks. And before that, I had my dice split up whether they were dice for forces of order or forces of destruction. And I would only use them for those armies. So I would have like 2 or 3 sets of dice. I don't really like people touching my dice, stuff like that. So I get very very superstitious about it, actually. And as far as turning it around, I find explosive profanity to be helpful. It may not sound like it, but I mean Michael can vouch. When I get a run of bad luck, it's I could curdle milk. So not quite as good as my wife, not quite as good as Alicia. I swear to God, she can lay into you with some curse words and it'll peel paint off the walls. So, but I don't know whether it's just going out like that explosive annoyance just makes you feel better about it, or it does help. But it does in my brain. It seems to help and actually turn things around. I don't know that I'd ever go to the distances that you have, Lord T, in setting them on fire or anything like that, but that works for me at any rate. Number 2, and this one was a very interesting one because so far we've discussed failure on the tabletop. This is a little bit of a more meta idea. What has been your worst model disaster? I.e., you just spent 15 hours on a single model, then something went wrong, or you lost it, destroyed it, or hated it, etc. So purely from a modeling point of view, what's been your worst disaster?
You mean as far as building models go?
Building, painting, something. I think the point of the question is in terms of something other than it just didn't perform well on the table. Something about the model itself that just made this particular kit or model just completely shit the bed for you.
Well, sort of a hybrid of the two. I've had bad luck with the not the Cauldron of Blood. What's it called? The Blood Rack Shrine. As well as my Cold One Chariot, just because they've got so many little fiddly bits that stick up, and the amount of times that like I've caught something on my clothing and it just like sent it flying, and lost a bunch of little pieces off of it or whatnot. I have had that kind of problem quite a bit. I haven't had too many problems like in the construction phase because, to be honest, I do the simple ones myself, and I usually chicken out, and I'm like, oh, this looks like a really complicated kit. I think I'll have somebody else build that for me. Which is turning out to be a problem with Malifaux because they have beautiful models, but like crazy fiddly kits. Mm-hmm. There's this one. There's it's a steam trunk. It's like a trunk that's got little tank treads on it. That's part of this Von Schill crew. I had actually made my own, like out of a little Lego chest and whatnot, and some war parts. But they finally released the actual model for it in plastic. I swear to God, it's a tiny little chest with some tank treads on it. It's 25 pieces.
Jesus.
25 pieces on a sprue. Like, with weird, like the faces are never attached to the heads. I don't,
What?
But yeah. Because,
well, I know when Alicia, she's just finished a project for you with one of those Malifaux crews. I know she was cursing with just how tiny and that wasn't even what I would consider a very difficult kit for them, but I know she was having the worst luck with it because she's used to the big heroic scale of the Warhammer stuff.
The difference there is they don't do hand sculpted. They do CAD. They do CAD designs for all their stuff. So it's a different scale. It's like a more realistic scale, but some really tiny pieces, and the way they build the kits, you're like, why is the head of this tiny model in 3 pieces?
Mm-hmm. So what about you, Michael?
It'd be my gyrocopter.
Yes, it would.
That poor hunk of metal. I have broken that thing so many times that I've given up on ever trying to fix it. It's gonna be broken. It is a airplane now because it has no propeller.
Mm-hmm. For me, I would have to say the worst model disaster was the Hex Wraiths. Those pieces are so freaking thin and tiny, and I have big pudgy sausage fingers, and I could not get the kits assembled. I sat here and I fussed with it, and I messed with it. I glued it to my hand several times. That was the downside of not using plastic glue. I was using normal super glue, which just made it worse, I'm sure. But, it finally got to the point where I was just like, I can't put this freaking kit together. And I had to give it to Alicia because I did not, and to this day I haven't built a Hex Wraith because they're too tiny. I can't screw with them. And then on this Slann, the Slann I did recently, I almost hucked it across the room because I kept not getting the paint right, and I was kind of holding it at weird angles to get the ink to go in, and I kept breaking off the little dangly bits, and it was frustrating. Number 3, have you ever made a list that has made perfect sense to you when you made it, but when you went to play it, you were ashamed of yourself, i.e. really bad list in practice or really cheesy?
Both.
Got an example?
When it was way back in the day when we were still when the dwarves still had the 7th edition book and we were playing Dwarves vs. Ogres, and I brought 50 Rangers. And not just any Rangers, 50 of Bugman's Rangers, and just pop them 12 inches away from your group on the corner. I was like, yeah, I kind of feel like a dick now. Because there's so many dudes.
Yep.
It was a little too much cheese on that one.
Yeah. I remember. What about you, Nick?
No, I would say it would be the impractical list. I had wanted to go with sort of a cav bus. So I had my Sorceress on a Dark Steed, I had my BSB on a Dark Steed, but I didn't really have enough cavalry models to really give them a proper bus. So
it was a short bus?
Yeah, so basically I played that first game, and I was like, okay, this totally just doesn't work. And then, for the rest of the games in the tournament, I've got 2 cavalry models, 2 cavalry heroes that I wound up attaching to infantry units.
Nice.
I have a sorceress level 4 on life on a horse. But I didn't have a good enough cav bus, so I'm like, well, I got to stick her in an infantry unit, so at least I can earthblood them or whatnot. So then you don't get lookout sirs. I mean, it was just a bad, I had a good idea, but I didn't have the right models to make my idea work, and I just kind of tried to make it work.
So I think my answer is, again, one of those failings of Magic. I wanted Magic to do more than it did. I came up with this genius idea so I would have all the spells I would ever need. I would make an Empire list with one of each of the 8 wizards in it. So it was I had a level 4 to light. I want to say I had a level 4 to death, too. And then it was 7 level 2s to each of the other lores. Admittedly, I was rolling just a fistful of channel dice. And I think I even had a battle priest in there, too. So I was rolling 9 or 10 channel dice a turn. But it was terrible because that's all I had. I had no BSB in the army because I couldn't afford it. I had no troops for much of anything. I mean, I was using little... I think at that point I had a 20-man brick of halberdiers was my biggest unit I could afford.
Yeah.
And it was just terrible. And it was I have 9 wizards, and I roll 4 on the Winds of Magic. And it was I get 1 spell off a turn, and those points were just absolutely wasted. But I thought it was awesome. I was I will have the answer to anything in this Magic, and it was just nope, now I've got a bunch of expensive redirectors and chaff that are going to run out there and get murdered. So last question from Lord T. Age of Sigmar, the GW staff that came up with Age of Sigmar, and a Nurgling. Screw one, kill one, marry one. Go.
Okay, so go over that one more time.
Age of Sigmar, I'm guessing the game itself, GW staff that came up with Age of Sigmar, and a Nurgling.
Alright. So, I'm going to marry the Nurgling, because, Grandfather Nurgle, he's not pretty, but he's at least loyal.
Right.
We're gonna screw Age of Sigmar, because, hey, that only has to have to do it one time.
Right.
And then we're going to kill the GW staff. Because for a long time I've told you guys how much I hate GW staff.
Right. All right, Nick, what you got?
I think I'm usually practical with this sort of thing. I'm going to have to murder the Nurgling, because that's just gross.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's between the game and the staff. Excuse me. I guess I'll have to marry the staff. This way I'm not stuck with the game in case I don't like it.
Right.
No, really. I don't blame the staff per se, because Age of Sigmar might not be a bad game. I just wish that they were more like their PR department. That's who I want to murder.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
we'll redirect that. They fled and you succeeded your leadership check to
exactly,
redirect.
exactly. If they had given us a 6 months heads up on Age of Sigmar, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as bad and traumatic.
Right. All right. So I kind of agree with you. But I don't know. I think, and this is going to sound really weird, but I'm going to have to fuck the Nurgling. Mainly because the rest of my plan, I've got to I've got to have AOS. I want to KOS, get rid of the game, and then I want to marry the GW staff so that I can be in on the design of whatever they choose to replace it. And if they make something that's like AOS, I can make their lives hell.
Yeah.
So there, that's my way to go on that one. It's clever, but there's obviously a price to pay. All right. So next is a question from United Wargaming. Have you ever helped someone who has had problems with the game or with painting?
Well, I'm not a good enough painter to help anyone. But I have, I guess a few people I know that are also very novice wargamers that I've helped out either with lists or just general advice or playing a game.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
I mean, I've helped a couple people pointers and like, hey, yeah, no, this is how your list should probably look, but nothing like, oh, I'm gonna completely teach you the game, because most of the people I meet that want to play Warhammer are already buying the models and already know how to play.
Right. Obviously, I've helped people with problems with the game. I think you do that just as a content producer, as people are confused why you do things, and so there's comment talks. But the thing I think that I've enjoyed the most is helping with painting. One thing we used to do a decent amount, and I'm kind of sad we haven't had a chance to fit one in lately. We used to do a painting night where we would just get together at my house and throw all your painting stuff on the table, and we would sit there and paint together, just kind of shoot the shit and kind of discuss painting techniques and kind of what's working and what's not. And so it was kind of a fun collaborative effort, because the three of us would be sitting in here bumbling like idiots. Alicia would be in her studio, which is 5 feet off to this direction, and so it would be like paint, paint, paint. Alicia, how do I do this? And then she'd yell the answer from the other room, and it was a great team building thing. But I think it definitely has helped all of us at various times with various painting and technique. So now we get into the hoity-toity questions from Vince here. And I mean that with all love, man. Number 1, failure is a very important part of any game. Without failure, there is no game. How much failure and how much risk is necessary in Warhammer compared to board games, RPGs, etc.? And Vince's question silenced the crowd. Way to go, Vince.
I would say that it needs to be fairly significant, because you don't want it to just be a math exercise. I mean,
Right.
it's a head-to-head game. Most board games and RPGs are either collaborative or sort of the risk is spread out amongst 4 or 5 people playing at least. So it's a 2-person game, and so you need to have enough randomness and risk involved to make it so that's not a foregone conclusion.
I concur. I like the idea of there being kind of at its basis, just with the normal dice, it being very swingy. But I'm also a real big fan of all the stuff that you were saying that the good players avoid, that super risk chance to win the game, that sort of thing. I love everything about Warhammer 8th that has random anything into it. If I have to roll on a table to see how bad I fuck myself, I love that rule, without fail. And I think that's what is very interesting of the game to me, is that opportunity to go, you know what, I can drink from this chalice and maybe I'll get a Demon Prince, or maybe I'll die horribly and lose the game, but it's the risk is in my hands to make that decision, and I very much like that idea. Michael?
I guess a lot of my stuff stems from the fact that I've always been a big video game player. So the whole failure chance and everything is more in a video game is a lot more. I can handle this. I can make it go my way just by the sheer fact that I'm better than everyone else. But in Warhammer, you get the chance of failure of, well, that just dicked me out of my entire thought process. I was going to make that charge, and that was going to set me up in this, and that doesn't happen, and you go, oh, I don't know what to do now. So, where you love the randomness of anything that's random, I very much love models that straight up go, this is what I'm going to do, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. So you like getting rid of that randomness. That actually leads perfectly into Vince's second question. And so we'll let you go first and answer this one. Why do players of games have such a hard time realizing that failure is necessary? That is to say, they want to create environments where they themselves can't fail, but then things get boring. Is it simple human nature, or is it the sting of defeat?
I want to say a lot of people avoid it just simple sting of defeat. I do not in any way want to get rid of the randomness in Warhammer. I think it's a fun part. I don't handle that very well. When something goes, well, it's going to go 3d6 somewhere, my brain goes, oh, that's going to hit me and it's going to wreck me. Now, it might go 3 inches. But my mindset immediately goes, this is going to make me fail the rest of this game, going all the way to it.
Okay, I can see that. So there's just sort of the anxiety of what might come.
Yeah. Where it's either going to be really good or really bad, and my mind immediately goes, worst case scenario is going to happen here. And, I mean, for a big point, failure is a big part of the game. You have to fail to learn your army.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you just always win, you're going to go, well, this always works. And then you hit that one time that, oh, this guy has the list and beat the list.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a way around it. That failure helps you go, well, maybe I need to add something different to it to give me a little more coverage.
Right. All right, Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's sort of player psychology. I think it's part of that whole fundamental attribution error concept. Where I had bad luck, but you made a mistake. So the idea being that you try to make things perfect for you because in your mind you have it set that you don't make mistakes. The things you do you've done because that's the right thing to do, and if there is failure, it's not your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And then also even like from sort of a narrative idea in your own mind, like if you go with that idea that you sort of envision yourself as the general of this army, that you become more invested in it. And even though, if you only ever rolled sixes, if that was your mutant power, you would get really bored of Warhammer really quickly. But you might think that's a great thing, until it happens to you. Sort of the Midas touch, right? It sounds like a good idea to never lose until you're like, well, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, rolling nothing but sixes would be great until your first leadership check.
Oh, I'm breaking. Panics? Yeah, you're about to lose.
Yeah. And I'll actually go with this from a different angle because I don't have anything to add beyond what you guys did. But narratively speaking, one thing that we've seen with the players who are no longer playing with us is that resistance to let your army operate in a place of weakness. Not knowing or not realizing that those weakened points, those failings, lead to good drama and good story. Mainly because I think we all kind of see ourselves as the heroes of our own story. And you never want the hero to get down. Even if you were able to step outside and look, okay, you know what, if this bad thing happens now, it leads to a great story, we instinctually don't want that to happen because it's like, who wants to root for the good guy to lose? So that would be kind of my take on that, is I think it's maybe self-interest. I don't know if that's a mean way of putting it, but... So the last question we have for us tonight is from our missing boy, Skip, who is at work, who gets to watch these things but can't be on them at work, has asked a question that we kind of laughed at when we were off. But after this whole discussion, I actually want us to answer this seriously. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it or give any description. I want you guys to answer what you think this question is asking seriously. And Skip asked, what is it like not to fail?
Well, I would say, that I don't really have an answer for that because I failed quite a bit. I think maybe there's a morale issue there, where it maybe the question maybe is more like, how do you not let failure drag you down?
Mm-hmm.
Because you could have I've lost games badly, but had a really fun time playing the game. And I always felt this was at least a chance, somewhere in there that I could have won. I've never had a game where like I lost on turn 1 or something like that. All my units were dead before I got a chance to go. But yeah, I think it's more along the lines of whether failure gets you down or not. And like I said, I've and I would say from this perspective, like I play Dark Elves, and you'll hear a lot of griping about Brolocks being broken. A lot of people will talk about Dark Elves are overpowered, and they're the number 1 or number 2 army in terms of it's the way when people rank the armies as far as the most powerful and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say at the time I think, wow, I play Dark Elf. I'm the Dark Elf player that loses a lot. So then I feel like God forbid I was playing Empire or something like would losing everything. But I think that doesn't that those are sort of unfair assumptions, right? Playing High Elves or Dark Elves doesn't mean you win all the time. Even though that's sort of become this idea that these armies are better and these armies are worse. Not every Tomb King player loses every game, even though people would consistently rate Tomb Kings as one of the lowest armies. But that's sort of like looking at it under a microscope in a bubble, not necessarily the way it happens.
Right.
And a lot, like I said, has to do with your local meta. Lizard men are considered a middle of the road army, but in your narrative group, you are playing lizard men, but you win almost all the time with them. And that has to do with your skill, with the meta of the games you're playing, the narrative campaign rules. Everything all sort of adds up together to give you that outcome. Whereas when people talk about, oh, this army is the best and this army is the worst, they're talking about in some imaginary world that doesn't exist. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
in theory, it's the greatest army, but that doesn't really mean anything in real life.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, Michael, what is it like not to fail?
Um, it's a I've I've had things what I've done where I've not failed. Doesn't happen very often, but it has happened. What it typically happens with me in not failing is it's this big build up of, yeah, I'm the greatest, I'm not gonna lose, and then the bigger you are, the harder you fall. Thing happens where you get yourself built so much up and then you fail. And I think that's probably that's a much worse feeling than constantly failing. Because when you build yourself all the way up and you're like, I am unbeatable, and then you get knocked down, getting yourself back up from that point of failing, it sucks.
It just doesn't hurt as bad when you're falling off a step stool than when you're falling off a roof, right?
Yeah.
So here's my answer, and I'm going to be serious as a heart attack on this one. What it's like not to fail is stagnant. For me, when I'm winning and winning and winning, there's no real push to come up with something new. There's no real. It's if it's not broke, don't fix it. So you don't experiment with things. You don't try new ideas. I mean, hell, that list, the Warriors list I did with you, where it was 2 5-man chosen dudes in front of a war altar. I would never have come up with that if I hadn't lost or not gotten the mission beforehand and needed to go a different way with it. I probably would have been playing the same, like Troll Bricks, same thing I had been playing. So I definitely think that once you take away that chance of failure, you take away the spark that makes you better than you were. Because there's not any reason to change. And I think ultimately the way you grow in anything, and I mean Warhammer is just a part of this, is you've got to find out where you're failing and engage those head on and find out what I need to change to get this not to happen anymore. And if you're one of those people who just never has had to face that, I mean the common saying is that virtue untested is innocence. It's immaterial. If you haven't had to face those failures, then your victories don't really count, in my opinion. So, that's kind of a heavy note to leave on, I know. But I think it's very important because it is just, I mean, like you were saying, Nick, earlier, you don't want to focus on those failures. You want to learn from them. You don't want to turn them into just that thing about you, that you're just the person that loses. Because then it's self-fulfilling. You're going to focus on every time you screw up instead of focusing on where you can grow from that. So, any final thoughts, gentlemen? We've been going on almost to the end of our limit here.
For me, I would say, as contractually obligated, in case of failure, take the seed of rebirth.
And I'm sure Skip will be absolutely thrilled you managed to fit that in somewhere. And you know, that is the best thing to leave on. So, Nicholas, I want to thank you for coming on. You have filled Skip's shoes most ably this week. It was a very interesting topic, and we very much appreciate having you on, sir.
Thank you.
So, also wanted to thank the viewers. Again, because we did have somebody who put forth for a later honorary boy that they wanted to talk about Age of Sigmar. I think we have decided, because we are not going to be doing Age of Sigmar and we do not much care for it, it would end up being a very negative program, and we have no real desire to feed any more negativity about this particular product. So, sorry, we're not going to do that show. But if anybody else, there are still 2 more weeks that we need to fill. If anybody else has a topic and would like to come on the show, definitely email us or leave a comment below, and we'll definitely get those full. But thank you again, everybody, and we will catch you next week. Bye-bye.